You are listening to Ismail Hassan, and I am the founder and head coach of Aikido of London. Welcome to the Aikido of London discussion series. Today's chat is with Leon Gauman, and we will chat about how Aikido is relevant for the modern times. Quite a big subject, and hopefully we will try and dig in a bit and see how we translate that between us. Before I go ahead, let me introduce you to Leon Gauman. Hello, Leon, and thanks for joining me. Hello. And today's chat, like I said, is a big subject. But before we do that, could you please say a little bit about yourself?
Hi. Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me.
You're welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Leon. I am also your student, among other things. Student in Aikido of London. Been practicing for about 7 years now. I stumbled into Aikido. Not really. Stumbled is not the right word. I looked for Aikido because it looked cool. That's the truth.
That's not unusual.
And it just fascinated me that these little guys managed to throw these big guys, and I was it looked beautiful. So I took a few times until I found Aikido of London. So I passed a couple of schools quite quickly. But so that's how I arrived into Aikido. I am outside the dojo. I'm a co-founder and director of product and strategy at Elsewhen. Elsewhen is a digital product consultancy. So we work with large corporate clients in financial services, insurance, telecom, and we help them launch new products and services, or as part of digital transformation agenda. So a lot of times I find myself in relatively stressful and corporate environments, and I, in general, kind of running your business and dealing with kind of high caliber clients. There's a lot of stress that is involved. There's a lot of egos. There's a lot of politics. And I also always found Aikido being superb tool to that kind of honed me and readied me to be able to deal with these things. And I really feel like I have a bit of a superpower sometimes in terms of how I can conduct myself or analyze things.
Superhero stuff. Very good. So.
Yeah, I do. I can, there's I can't really comment about other martial arts, but Aikido certainly pits you against yourself and pushes you to the limit and teaches you how to deal with difficult situations. Of course, if you have the right environment, and I think that's extremely helpful in kind of high stakes environments.
That's fascinating. Thanks for that intro. And your work is obviously very involved, and I'm sure it takes a lot of energy and concentration on your behalf. And I suppose that's very relevant to the question: how relevant is Aikido itself to modern times? It's a fascinating one. I've asked myself that question many times, and on and off over the years. My own exposure to it is as traditional as it can get, and yet remarkably modern at the same time. The fact that this was created in a whirlpool of traditional martial arts in the last century, in the early part of the last century, meant it had a foot in going back many centuries, maybe even a millennia in that respect. So when you look at it that way, and it's a sense that I myself have picked up on more and more as the years have gone by, that there is something that quite deep and quite old as in traditional about it, and that's very important. It gives it its potency, I believe. Pardon me, but it's also shifted and it's trying to adapt itself. And I say trying to because the question reveals, I think, how successful is that in terms of the modern period that we're in, and I don't mean particularly now regarding COVID and the impact that has. I'm talking of the last 20, 30 years and looking forward, and it's a challenge, and it's how in many ways visually you said that what struck you was its beauty, and you were impressed by certain things, and yet in another way it's quite it looks quite stylized, and it looks irrelevant in a way because, well, hang on a moment, martial art is fists and legs and choking and pins that are closer to judo and the MMA sort of genre of stuff, and this stuff looks unusual, eccentric, maybe a better word, and so there's a layer there that is obviously from its root, and to translate that and give someone relevance, and say to them, well, look, this can do a lot of good for you. It has a lot of power and a lot of relevance, and you need to be open to it and to see that. I like to think that I'm doing that, but I'd like to hear a little bit about your thoughts on that. Do you find it relevant? Obviously, you like it, and it's relevant in the sense that you benefit from it, but relevance in the broader society, not necessarily immediately regarding how it helps you manage your work, for example, and amongst other things. If you can elaborate a little bit, Leon.
Sure. I actually just realized something, that when you asked me how did I get into Aikido, and I said that it looked cool, and I liked kind of what I perceived in it. It's absolutely not why I'm in Aikido now. And the veneer that Aikido has from the outside, I think, for a non-practitioner is completely different to what it is when you actually start practicing it. And I think it's an interesting point that it's very deceptive. Because
you mean the appearance versus the actual contact and feel of it,
and what the art is about. I think it has what's on the outside is so superficial and shallow compared to what you can experience, and it's interesting to I just realized it on myself that what attracted me to Aikido is not something I care about or look at, or obviously I'm interested in Aikido being performed at actually not even, I don't really care if Aikido looks good anymore. It's not important to me at all. And actually the things that attracted me to it are not the reasons that I'm there practicing. So it's an interesting point. I actually just now realized that, and I probably need to think about it a little bit more. But in terms of my day-to-day, I think Aikido really helps me in situations that require from me a very swift and cool-headed judgment. And I think you and I, we spoke to a student of yours and a friend of mine, Jose, who does high flying finance.
And that's right. Yes.
He was mentioning a very similar experience, kind of how his cool head can prevail in situations where everybody kind of losing a little bit, because I think that's something that Aikido teaches you to maintain that clarity in situations where we're actually are not super pleasant in a lot of times.
Yeah.
And I think that's is a huge benefit. And in general, I think the balance that you reach by having this third thing in your life at that level of depth is very hard to quantify. But for, I think, us as humans, as conscious beings, and work home is potentially not enough as soon as we cross the barrier of being able to feed ourselves, and this is something that I think about a lot. If you think about where humanity is going, and us constantly seeking and having the freedom and the leisure time to seek alternative meanings and alternative activities. Aikido is such a huge kind of tool to throw yourself in, and I find that that's completely unexplored and not in terms of that is not known, but in terms of like Aikido is not as big as it could be or should be. And I often wonder why is that, because it's so clear to me how important and beneficial it is for a modern person.
It's that's a very poignant and interesting observation on your part. Just thinking a little earlier as you were explaining yourself, it reminded me of a chat with one of the parents in the teenage class, and she's a doctor, and psychology is a big part of what she does. I don't think she's a psychologist or a psychoanalytical counselor of any type, but it does play a part in what she does. And she's talked about the benefits that her son has got, and I actually can see that with my eyes as I sit there. And as you probably know, that Olya, one of my other students, does the teaching now for teenagers, and that allows me to sort of sit back a little bit and observe how things progress. And in our chat, what came up was how he's benefited, how he as a person has changed, and he's only going once a week, and he's missed a lot for various reasons, school exams, for example. But he apparently he struggles with some things. I'm not exactly sure what that is, and I don't think it's important for me to know. I think it's important for the parent to see the child progressing, and it's important to see the child enjoying it and doing well out of it. That thing that you're talking about, that thing that you can potentially tap into, is doing its bit for him. And what it is I try to sort of verbalize it in that there's a system here where you can really get stuck in. I mean, you can take it to quite a level of physical engagement that is getting pretty tough and pretty rough if you want to go that way. And then there's the other end, which, as you probably realize, doesn't interest me when it's muted, and I like it to be alive. But what it does is it allows, hopefully, something that's quite natural in people. It is the martial sense, if you want to choose a term. And if you're asked a very general way of describing that, it's your life force. It's the very thing that keeps you walking, without getting too detailed about its nature. The fact that we've got this thing that, if pushed, will fight for survival, will fight for food, will fight to protect its loved ones, and it's alive and well in most of us. And you don't want to take that to an extreme. I certainly don't. We all know what happens when you take that too far. You're getting into the realm of fighting now. You're getting into the realm of a destructive quality. But short of that, maybe approaching that is you feel it, and it's important to feel it, because I think what's happened in our modern time, it's comfort. Above all is comfort. And for all the difficulties, was it 2008, I think, was the crash. and the money ran out, and the difficulties, and without dismissing the struggle that many people would have had, in contrast to having a crash like that 30, 40, 50 years earlier, it would have been far more painful, far more suffering would have been there. So if we take that as an indication that we are all comfortable, and materially, that is, that part of us doesn't really get challenged, but it doesn't go away. It's as a human being, you are born with it, and if it's repressed, if it's not allowed to express itself non-destructively, that is, not allowed to come out in some kind of way where you can apply it. And some people are very good, of course. They can put it in their work. They can put it into their life in general. But there's a place where there's a certain quality of it that is desirable. And it may not belong, it doesn't belong at home in a relationship, or when you're talking to your mum and your dad, your wife, your girlfriend, boyfriend. It's not the right place for that. And work, as you described, you have a very high-powered position, and it can benefit you. But that's the consequence of something you've taken in class, and then you arrive there, and these qualities have sort of evolved with it. Coming back to that teenager, he sleeps better apparently because the agitation, the mental agitation in his head is calmer. He can let go of whatever it is that is in there, and he can apply it with one of the other teenagers, one of the adults who's helping, and he can push it, and he gets a little grin in his face, a little glint in his eye, and that's on a quite basic level. I haven't even touched technical stuff. I haven't touched in terms of evolving as the years go by. Something that we're all discovering over the years, but just that simple fact. That is incredible, and I think there should be room for that. In a sense, in this country, for anyway, boxing has always played a part where troubled kids possibly can turn up instead of getting involved with gangs. They go in there, and we all know you're not going to be a champion. You're not going to be another Muhammad Ali or a Sugar Ray Leonard. And a Mayweather, you may, but the likelihood is that you're not. And between doing nothing and getting in trouble, or being stuck on the couch, and getting frustrated, or even depressed, and being a world champion, there's a lot of scope there. And if you can turn up somewhere and you can work your body, get fit, get your mind fit, get your body moving in a very creative way, a very challenging way, is good for you. I can't really simplify it more than that. It's a huge benefit, and Aikido certainly takes it further than most other arts. But again, like yourself, I don't want to get too much into that because I've invested my time and energy in Aikido, and that's the one that I'm familiar with. Again, I mean, for your own point of view, how do you see it evolving? Because you've stated something that matters to me, as you know, and it's the popularity of it. So regardless of my positive approach here, the reality is that compared to yoga, for example, which is traditional, is ancient, even older than Aikido historically, and yet it's made huge presence the world over, and every corner, every church, hall, every community centre, and professional full-time centres are within walking distance of most neighbourhoods now, which is quite an achievement. And why do you think they've got that? And why do you think? I don't know if we struggle. It's not so much struggle, but not quite getting the footfall that yoga gets, and making our own impression in modern times.
I have a hypothesis. So I kind of during COVID, where our conversation is kind of post peak, but still is at the lockdown level.
Well, it's reality, isn't it? Is where we are now.
Exactly. So we're I do my weapons in our garden, but I don't get to go to the dojo, and I obviously miss that very much. But I I'm substituting with a daily yoga practice. And this, I notice how popular yoga is, and how many different levels of yoga are out there. Different teachers at different skills, and so I've been comparing that to Aikido and wondering why yoga managed to achieve that, and Aikido hasn't yet. And same with meditation, I think. Mindfulness, at least the the first entry steps into meditation practice has been democratized. Most people, at least in my circles, have experimented with meditation in one form or another. Either through one of the mindfulness apps or through some self-initiated practice. But it's I would argue is as ancient as yoga, and managed to make the crossing. And one of the hypotheses that I have is that Aikido has never found, and perhaps is not destined to, find the low bar of entry. You can't really dip your toes into Aikido. And I think that is what is missing, and potentially is not even possible. I certainly don't have the answer if that's possible or not. I wonder what you think about it. But in Aikido, we're missing that level that somebody can literally turn on a YouTube video and within 20 minutes dip their toes into the practice. And I think there's a lot that can be said about what does that do to the practice itself, and if you look at the different levels of people that are teaching yoga, a lot can be said on how deep they are in the practice themselves, and what does that do to yoga practice, right? And I think that's definitely part of the conversation. But I do think that in Aikido, we don't have that step at all. What do you think about that?
Well, that's an interesting contrast between how it's made itself available, and YouTube and streaming has become, especially now, has become a big part of that education system. You can pull out a rug in your living room, put the TV on, stream, watch the class, have a group session. The quality of that, and is that yoga? Because I've chatted to people from various countries over the years, and within the world of yoga, there was, and probably still is, a raging argument about someone, you, me, we turn up, we do our stuff. I've done a lot of yoga in very good schools, actually, US side and UK side, and it's very impressive. Some of the teachers are very impressive. The turnout is very impressive. But you've got the situation where the old school are saying it's a spiritual practice, and the physical process is a pathway towards that. It's a framework, something that we often use in Aikido. It's not the thing itself, but the means to a goal, an achievement. In your study, there is no goal, there is no achievement. It's a continuous thing. But if we traditionally, yoga is preparing the body for meditation, which is the highest form of enlightenment. One could argue, but that's a real big thing we're talking about there. And how many of the millions of people who participate that even know of that kind of terminology? You can turn up, back to what I said, do it long enough, do a couple of 100 hours, you do your British Wheel of Yoga certification thing, and you're qualified to teach. So you're already a teacher, and maybe if you stick with it long enough, maybe you think you're in a realm of mastery and wisdom, and you can pass something beyond just the physical exercise to your followers. take that, you go back to a video. How do you convey what goes on the inside of someone practicing? And many people may not even care. And that's the raging argument, that the other side of that is, look, and I sort of hinted at it, from couch potato to world champion with boxing or in martial art. If you've got someone who's doing very little and you've convinced them to stretch a little bit, because let's be rude about this and say, well, all yoga is stretching. But you could argue that weapons in Aikido is just a couple of guys and girls whacking each other with sticks. But we know that's not the case. It's a difficult thing. You're teaching. You've left it at a very basic level, but that person is their muscle tone is improving, their conditioning is changing, they're benefiting out of it. Are they going to be on the path of yoga? Is this something that they're going to continue to try and get deeper and deeper into? A few will. And so the argument is that you need the large base to get the ones at the top of the pyramid, meaning the specialists, the experts, the masters, the gurus, and I get the feeling that it's not quite working out that way. That instead of progressing, the level remains the same, but the person just does it for a long time, and because they've been doing it for a long time, that equates to, well, I've 20 years of yoga, 20 years of Aikido, but the level has been the same at every stage. There's been no penetration or deeper understanding of the art, and if you're working as you are, as most people are in other professions, you've got your personal life, your family life, your friends. You make time for this thing, and to come and arrive at it, you're saying you can't dip your feet in it, and you arrive at it, and maybe what it is that Aikido demands quality, quality of your time, the quality of your attention, and the quality of longevity. It can't be wishy-washy in that way. That's a challenge. Most people won't, and you know that. I'm sure you do. And so, is there a bottom line that it can be brought down to where you don't have to go that far, that it's beneficial, and yet doesn't frustrate or drive crazy those who take it more seriously and are more devoted to it? Is there a bridge between that, and there can be mutual respect, and the bottom one can explain itself to the broader public, and that's a challenge, because you mentioned YouTube. One of the big challenges is forget about getting deep and deeper into it. You get all this quite vile sometimes criticism of it, because it's the eyes of someone who's looking at it through fighting. And we all know that it's not point blank fighting. Fighting spirit is something I always talk about. That back to that life force. It has a fighting survival quality to it. But that and fighting is not the same thing. Is how you take that energy and channel it into something that can elevate you without sounding pretentious. It can elevate you. It can transform you, and ultimately find your center. Something that's widely spoken, even in broad circles in corporations, especially stateside. The center, but the center is a very complicated and yet remarkably simple thing. It's when you find yourself in what you do, and things settle. Your body, your mind, your spirit settles into this body, and generally it's the lower part of the body. If we accept Oriental descriptions and philosophy, and it gets deep. I've already touched on 2 or 3 things there that maybe it's just a handful. It's just too much for people to do. And if you're just, again, don't mean to be rude, stretching, it's a little easier, isn't it? And you don't have to engage with the second person. You don't have to engage with the instructor and you and the other person, and you've had a hard day at work. You know some of this yourself. You've turned up, and maybe the mind isn't quite set for the level of Aikido that you enjoy, and it takes a little time to warm up to it, and it can feel rough and not pleasant, and I've heard, and I completely agree, that a good martial art, a good dojo, a good Aikido school, in many ways is a microcosm of life itself. That is to say, however you are out there, in general as a person, will be represented on the mat in condensed form, in a more immediate form, and which is a wonderful thing, because it gives you a great opportunity to work on where's the blocks, where's the hindrance, where's the anticipation of error, and whatever it is, physical, mental, or otherwise. And again, it sounds like very scary stuff, because let's face it, I've worked very hard and I want to get away. I want to have an hour or 2 hours of doing something where I can forget work, and I don't want a microcosm. I want escapism. So, it's complicated. How does one find balance? Well, look, if it's just fun, it's not going to go far for long. If it's dead serious military boot camp, it's very off-putting, and not everybody wants to do that. And not everybody wants to do that for a sustained period. It's not desirable. So how can we kind of poke our foot into one and the other, and have a bit of substance to it and a quality to it that can bridge the broader society? Well, sorry, Leon, you want to add to that? Or?
There's something that you said to me once, that Aikido has that element of danger that is... brings a lot of things to life, and is a big difference between it as a practice and other practices that, where you can experience kind of mind-body connection and body improvement and train your center and etc. That there's this element
of fear,
of danger,
fear.
The fear, that really elevates the practice.
It does, because it's the one of the mechanisms that is involved with elevation. Thrill seekers will know what I'm talking about. I mean, that becomes a drug in that case, and it can be in Aikido as well. It's very funny you mentioned that, because it gets criticism that is ineffectual and such things. And yet,
but this is the contradiction, right?
Yes,
that's the interesting, because there is this criticism of this is not real. But on the other hand, if you're on the inside, this element of it, and that's what really puts it apart from other things. But
I would say that also depends on who you've trained with and how you
100%
approach it. I mean, my own background, as I often repeat to those who ask, it was potent. There was a significant danger, but it was controlled. Even there, it was still controlled. It wasn't reckless. It had a fine line between order and chaos. It would oscillate back and forth, very much like a skier falling down the mountain. Not skiing down a mountain, but falling down a mountain. Looks like any moment they're about to crash, and yet beautifully in control at the same time. And that's it's an incredible place to be in, because you're in that area where that thrill, that fear generates is there, and that's part of the rush. And some people love that. They grow in that. It wakes them up and gives them a certain impetus, and if you can use that and channel it into your training, long may it last. And again, it's a great thing to experience. But many places talk about comfortable Aikido and safe Aikido, which you could argue is a modern thing again, where when you think about it, regardless of whether you do martial art or Aikido or anything, the idea of a safe martial art is bizarre. It is historically not the case. And yet, what do you want? SAS training and Marines? We're not preparing for that kind of war. If there's any war or challenge, is yourself. to discipline yourself, not to give up. A move is frustrating you and you're not getting anywhere. Maybe it's dull in contrast to adrenaline junkies, but if you approach it the right way, there's just enough there to pique your interest and keep you going and feed into your activity, and the benefits are interesting because they're not. You don't go in there to really get fit, but fitness is an outcome. You don't really go in there to achieve your center. That's too self-conscious. It's too in the upper parts of your brain. You should go in there because you feel something about this. It's like, wow, there's a catch here, and I can't even put words to it. But it yeah, I mean, if you're old enough, you'll know what I mean. The Heineken adverts back in the 80s and I think 90s, where the beer that can go to parts of the body other beers cannot reach. And I joke about it because I used to think of Aikido, maybe it goes into parts of the body that other martial arts can't. It's not quite true, because really, in the end, the body's the body, and if you dig in deep enough, you're just finding a different way to get in there.
That's an interesting question. Do you think that Aikido has is it different to other martial arts in that sense?
I don't know really, because maybe there are people more qualified or more conscious of that side of it to give an answer. I think I know, but I'm not sure. For several reasons. One, I've always approached it quite martial on a personal level. I guess it appealed to me that way, and it revealed that side of me very quickly at a very young age. And once more, going to Chiba Sensei, and as most people who have heard of him will know, that he was a formidable teacher and a practitioner. He was of the old school warriors, and you're not going to bump into those anymore, or you'd be very lucky to, or very unlucky. It depends on your on your engagement, but it's the relevance is difficult. I've done Iaido. I teach you that as well, and the Iaido is, most of my Iaido also came from Chiba Sensei. So that's what I loved. That's what I enjoyed. I've tried some karate, some judo, dabbled in judo, but not enough to really get a grip on it. But on the basis of how deep I got into Aikido, when I do look at the others, I do actually understand what's going on. And so, because as I said, the body is the body, but I don't know. I can't. Certainly not right now. That's a challenge, which I would have to think about. And
so let me ask you another question.
If you hold that question, Leon, probably I'll think about it and come back, possibly for another chat, because I think it's a fascinating question. And because please don't forget your question. But what I'm getting at is, a lot of people get very high and almighty with Aikido, with this sort of pseudo chat of superiority, but those karate people love their karate just as much as you love your Aikido. Those kung fu people love their kung fu. Those kendo people love their kendo, and those who've got enough ability and enough dedication and vision to see where it's taking them, they stick at it, and you can't turn around and say that we're special. It's just maybe what we're fortunate with is that the people who founded it were brilliant, genius martial artists across the board, and able to give Aikido their quality. But this comes back to that lower point you talked about. Are we supposed to dilute that and lose that? Again, it's a question possibly for another time. Your question, Leon, and sorry to go on.
So it ties in. So how popular has Aikido been in Japan, actually? I know you mentioned that it was more of an elitist type of activity, but actually, how popular was it, and how accessible was it?
Are you talking about today or the last
Historically,
50 years?
I'm
Historically,
talking
yeah,
about it from foundation at
yeah.
peak.
Well, foundation is interesting. It was elite. You had to have references. You had to be in the network
Hmm.
where, if I understand, you needed a couple of letters of introduction, and which meant you had to be in the right circles of civil servants, military, police, and possibly academics, and maybe the people in the arts. Your average Joe, your average person, probably would have no access to it. Post-war, Japan is a different matter. Everything got stopped. I think the Americans banned all training of any kind of any martial art. I think up to about 1948. Then the doors opened, but the sale, the pitch, if you want to put it that way, was this is a system for developing character, or for an exercise for doing Buddhist related art in a sense, meaning they're diminishing, emphasizing the martial aspect of it, because that close to the war, martial and militarism would have been very closely associated, and that's not what the Americans wouldn't have wanted that at that time, and not surprisingly, really. But time's gone by, and the country opened up, and then it opened the doors, but it was still quite elitist. It was the son, Kishimoto Ueshiba, the founder's son, who was a wise and shrewd businessman in the sense that he took his father's art and probably realized that if we don't open this up to people from all walks of life, it'll be like the older schools, which are still around but very obscure, tucked in a corner in some region of Japan, and you got to sign this and sign that, and they're not looking to grow. If I believe I'm interpreting this correctly, and then it stays small and it stays traditional and probably only Japanese. Although those traditional older schools have opened up to the West little by little as well. But Aikido would have ended up there. But suddenly you've got my own teacher, Chibu Sensei Tamura in France, Asai in Germany, Yamada in New York, and many, many more who packed up their bags and traveled the world over and taught an extraordinary number of people in seminars to broaden it. So today it's a different kettle of fish. Millions, 1.5 billion, 2 million maybe worldwide, which sounds like a lot, I suppose, but if you divide that by the growing population, it's still rather small. And so it doesn't compare with yoga, if that's part of your direction there.
But actually, with the exception of karate, it's probably one of the more popular Japanese martial arts, right?
I believe I understand the Aikikai itself, which is the largest organization, is the largest martial arts organization in the world.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Whereas the only way that could possibly be is if you took karate, which would be more populous. You go to any class, especially the children's class, they can be quite huge actually, but they break up. I mean, Aikido groups break up, but the Aikikai seems to have the ability to retain a lot of those groups. But in the karate ones, there's this group, and there's that group, and there's that group, and if you track it all back down, it either goes to the Shotokan and Funakoshi Sensei from the 20s and 30s, or it goes to the Okinawan schools, and so there's more karate overall by far, but less. No group is as big as the Aikikai. So in that regard, it's very successful and very popular, particularly places like France. I think there's more Aikido in France than there is in Japan. If the last time I checked, and
same as judo, possibly, no?
Very likely. Judo has an interesting history. Certainly, the United Kingdom, where it arrived before anywhere else, it was huge. It had two organisations. One disappeared. At least I think it did. I certainly don't hear of it today. The one that survived, and with the bulk of the membership, is the one that's tied in with the Olympic Committee. So it's logical. The moment it became an Olympic sport, then the organization that was affiliated with that was the one that made it, and the other one, they probably all packed up and joined that one or retired. Aikido is not the way of Olympics, thank goodness. But it'll get a huge exposure. But I'm not sure it would work. I think it goes against what it is. Yoga is not Olympic either, to my knowledge, and yet karate, unfortunately, is supposed to be there this year, has made it. But but this is an interesting sort of diversion. The karate, it'll be like taekwondo, that it's great that they're in, but what will evolve is great athletic prowess. You'll see the athletic guys will make headway in competitive karate in the Olympics. The strictly martial arts guy, the guy and girls who think like martial artists, who have the dirty tricks, if you want, or they're clever in certain ways, but may or may not have the athleticism that the Olympics will demand. It could be that you're a grade of athleticism below, but you've got an outlook, a ferocity possibly, and an intelligence that can counter for that, but that won't be encouraged. They don't want that. They want a more. I may be mistaken here, and sorry guys if I've got it wrong, but I get the feeling that that's the way it's going to go, and maybe it'll be a good thing. But it doesn't answer our part for modern Aikido. It's a big question, and I mean, do you have a suggestion? Do you advise if you for listeners? What would you say? What would you say that is good for them in terms of modernity and relevance and being patient and giving it a chance to do its thing?
Can you explain your question, please?
Yeah, it's a big question for you. It's an important one for you. You'd like to see it, I suppose, have more presence and without diluting itself. What would you say to someone listening in the sense of, hey guys, look, come and try this out. It's fantastic. I've benefited from it. I think it's very relevant to your life. And if you can give it a chance and immerse yourself in it and sufficiently to pick up on that and that the energy of it, of going to a class and engaging with other people in what looks like a very stylized way, but actually is a very visceral and very powerful way that I'm explaining to you and giving you the answer at the same time, I think.
I think Aikido is a very complete system, and I think we touched that in this conversation as well. You know, if you just kind of strip it down without going too deep, you know, you get a great workout. You know, you get your flexibility, you get strength, you get really great kind of. You work up a lot of sweat. You know, if you do it properly, it's intensive. You get your mind and body, connection of discovering this whole new language that exists within, that is not, your body has a whole other language that unless you are a body practitioner, you're not aware of. And once you do, you understand that it's like discovering another sense. It's like, being able to hear suddenly. There's this whole world of the body.
Hear, feel, and listen through your body rather than just your mind.
It has its own thing. And and there is this mindfulness is way beyond than that. So if that's something that is interesting, and the danger element, you with the right teacher, you get to, you walk through it. It's not like it's not like jumping off a cliff, because you can't. There is no parachute. You can't jump off a cliff. It's you get to slowly walk through a process of getting yourself familiar with the with the martial side of it, and this is, I think, what is missing a lot in modern life.
It reminds me of a little bit of fine actors, theatrical actors, that 30, 40 years into their career, and when they walk onto that stage, they still have butterflies, they're still nervous, they're still scared. And as you said, you're not jumping off a cliff. There is no parachute. You're not going to die, but you probably feel like you're going to die. It's that back to that primal thing that you don't have to go to those extremes. It exists in the banal, in the day-to-day life that we all have, and to have a little bit of that in your daily life is a great thing. It reminds you that you're alive, and that every breath, every move, every action that you take, I think that ties in very well to today's life, because we can get very stale and very stagnant, and I think that also ties into, as you were talking, actually, something very something maybe that you can't get in yoga. Again, I don't know, but certainly in martial art in general, and Aikido in particular, is mental agility, to be able to adjust and change your situation on the hoof, on your toes. You've got to think quickly, but not think clever as in crafty. Think clever as in working things out that didn't work before, and you've got to change. And the teacher's changed a move, or he's changed his approach. He's in a different mood. You're in a different mood. The others are in a different mood. Someone is very strong, and you're not sure you can handle it. How do you adapt to that? And it's there's a whole world of its own, and a very creative one. And once you've stimulated that part of somebody, some maybe innately that way, and it needs and they'll go further. But ultimately, if you can bring those elements into it, when you shoot off and you've got that mental agility, I do not doubt that it has its uses in life in general, and in the workplace, and in your personal life. You're thinking quicker. You see
100%,
you see and sense things, and because it's mindfulness, it's awareness that it's forced you to, in order to respond, that you have to pay attention and be with it, and I think again that's a great thing for people to achieve, and again.
And how did I don't know if he ever spoke about it, but maybe you picked it up just from spending so much time with him. But how did Chiba Sensei viewed this? Certainly, he must have been aware of, he was in the UK and in the US because he was sent to spread the art, right? So inevitably, his whole existence on another continent had to do with the desire of the founder to perpetuate this forward. So in some way or another, he must have been aware of that and entertaining these ideas, in some way or another, consciously or non-consciously.
Without a doubt, it was his raison d'etre. It was his purpose, and he took it on 120%, 200%, if that were possible. It had immense faith in it, and of its powers and its abilities. In many ways, a little too much, because when you unleash that belief, that zeal, it can be quite domineering. It can be quite scary for a believer. If you know what I'm saying, that they're pour. If you've shown interest, he'll pour. He'll reciprocate that. If you show 100%, he'll give you 100%. It's that because it has to come from you. He can't. As forceful a personality as he was, you can't force someone to learn something that they're neither open to or willing to make the effort. But once that's happened, he will reciprocate, whatever you are, of whatever background, of whatever gender. I've had chats about this with friends as well. That for a man of his era, of his generation, his view towards women was incredibly modern, incredibly open. And in other words, listen, if you're taking this seriously, I'll take you seriously, and I'll do everything I can to do that. And someone who's so in tune with his own body, his own mind, his own spirit as a one entity. We all have this predisposition towards separating. The term we use, mind, body, spirit, but in tradition, it's the whole thing exhibits itself simultaneously. There are ebbs and waves, but it's he very much sees things that way. So he'll see your sort of essence, I guess, and his mission is to help you cultivate that through these techniques, through these forms that we've all learned ourselves over time, and that means that if the person you're grabbing is a modern 21st century person, it's a modern thing he's doing. He was modern of his time when you think about it. He did, if you ever watch some of the older instructors and older Japanese from pre-war Japan and post-war Japan, the body language changed. Myself, I just got back in my own, as you know, I was in Japan, a fantastic trip last year. And a timely one at that, and I was looking, the women more than the men, but across the board, the way they hold themselves, the way they walk, they could be anywhere in the world. There is not that old school way of moving that you associate Japanese women doing. She could be Swedish, she could be French or English or pardon me, or German, and of course there are distinctions. There are localized distinctions that give the characteristics of where we come from, and that's what differentiates that. But in terms of a sort of an overall modern thing, it was interesting, and it's changed, and the food has changed. Probably more meat, the modern thinking, what we're challenged with, the globalization. I mean, the benefits are immense, and we wouldn't be talking right now if it wasn't for the globalization. Aikido would never have made its way to the West, to the United Kingdom. So that's yet again another subject. But it is modern. The person that approaches is modern, and maybe some people who try to learn it are old-fashioned. But to really get it, you've got to open up to it. You've got to, an openness is what we claim, certainly in the West. We claim to be open to new ideas, to individuality. And if that is the case, then, hey, open yourself up to this other system and get stuck in there. And I think it has. I think I'm answering my own question, which we often can deviate from that. Yes, it's obvious. I believe it has relevance, very much so. I think the key is to get people to see, and I think seeing the value in something is yet another discussion. To see something for what it is probably not as easy as we think. Maybe you're very observant and maybe very sensitive to the arts, to various systems, and if you don't happen to have that openness, whether that can be cultivated or encouraged, and that's a challenge, and we shall see. It's a long road ahead, Leon. As you're finding, and I've been doing this a long time, and it's going to carry on. And as I always say, long may it last. And it's great talking to you. I think we should probably come to an end because we're approaching 60 minutes. It's quite impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, time flies. It was really good. Thank you for having me.
I think we've just established that we've got more questions out of this than answers, but that's inevitable. It's and hence my opening salvo that it's a big question, and Aikido is big. It's like all great things. if you find something in life that is bigger than yourself, that's fantastic. It'll bring out the best in you, and possibly the worst as well sometimes. But it's the package. It is the way it is. And I'd like to thank you for coming in. And via iPhone, via Anchor FM, which is a great application, and
despite lockdowns, and COVID.
And I'm sure we will work our way out of this. It's going to be slow, I believe, but I think life hopefully will restore to some semblance of normality or positive. Fingers crossed. And
I'm sure everybody who's listening to this and is practicing Aikido is edging to get back on the mat. So I hope we'll be able to get to do that sooner.
Because let's face it, stir crazy, isn't it? Who wants stir crazy? Get your gi on and come and learn. And again, thank you very much, Leon, and looking forward to future chats, and hopefully see you soon as well.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.